Hi, and welcome to the Round Sky Solutions Scribe Training. I'm Charlotte, a Collab trainer with Round Sky Solutions, and I'm joined by Rebecca Fisher-McGinty and Daniel Little. Thanks for joining us. You're watching this because you're already a little bit familiar with Collab and want to be able to take on the process more fully through the scribe role. Well, it might surprise you, but the scribe role is actually absolutely key. Being a scribe and having a good scribe integrated into a team is one of the fundamental ways to make collaborative accountability work. The scribe plays a very important role in keeping a team focused during a meeting and in meeting outputs, and also makes it possible for the members of a team to always have the background information they need about the team at their fingertips throughout the course of their work. We're going to get into all the nitty-gritty details here so that you know exactly what you need to know about each piece of the scribe role. Welcome. So first, what we'll do is just give a quick introduction to the purpose of scribing and the role of the scribe. We'll introduce you to the tracking documents you and your team will need to stay on track. And we'll have a tutorial within a mock living agenda demonstrating exactly what a scribe is doing during a meeting, including managing agenda items, shared documents, and outputs. Then we'll delve into how to quickly capture what the team has achieved in the form of a wrap and updates to the tracking documents. But before you watch any further, if you've not already watched the Intro to Collab presentation, you should do that first, because it will cover some of the terms and concepts we'll be using in this training. You'll find that intro in your Collab training folder under training videos. And if you have the Collab cards available, you should pull out the card for the scribe role. To start off with understanding the role of the scribe, I'd like to ask participants on the call if they can share an example of a group they worked in when meeting outcomes were not recorded well.
I remember so many meetings in one of the companies that I worked for where we had a lot of complex tasks to do and we had to delegate to a lot of different people. It was really confusing, and some people were taking their own notes that they could be personally organized, and some people didn't. And even amongst the people who were really trying to be organized, there was a bunch of times where each person had a different idea about what was going to happen, and it all created a lot of confusion. We had to keep going back over the same territory again and again to really finally get clear. It was pretty frustrating.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Daniel. I definitely have had that experience.
I'll go next. That really resonates a lot with my experience, Daniel. I've been in a lot of experiences where we actually had no one scribing and taking notes and nowhere to keep track of decisions. At one of my previous jobs, this resulted in everyone interpreting our decisions differently. And we all didn't really understand what we were doing or who was doing what. And also, we had the same conversation over and over and over and over. Not good.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I'm definitely familiar with that. So thanks for sharing. We're going to go right into the purpose of scribing because it will help answer some of those questions. So in terms of purpose, scribing is paramount to the success of collaborative teams because of this super important fact. The communication, storing, of clear results from operations and governance conversations allows for everyone to be on the same page without someone looking over everyone's shoulder to make sure they know what's happened. In other teams, a scribe might be called a note taker, a secretary, or a minute taker. Here, we've created a new format for scribing that is minimal yet comprehensive. We don't record absolutely everything that's said, just the outputs and important details the team needs to be able to move forward on the decisions that come out of a meeting. Ultimately, everyone in a team will be cross-trained of scribes and facilitators. However, if your team is just getting started, you may be the one to train the next scribe. So listen carefully and we'll share everything you need to know. The first step is getting your documents set up, which means establishing a living agenda, an operations tracking doc, a master governance doc, and a business model tracker for your team using the templates we've provided for you in the course platform. From here on, the responsibility of the scribe will be mostly to maintain and update these documents according to the progress the team makes by processing agenda items. Part of this includes knowing the correct format for outputs, which we'll go over. The other part of scribing that may be a new feature for you, and I can't stress how important this can be, is listening for important synthesizing details and doing some key wordsmithing throughout the meeting process to help lend clarity to agenda processing and outputs. A clever and tuned-in scribe can ease the processing and integrating of agenda items for the facilitator and all the meeting participants. So, how might a clear scribe role have changed the situations you both described earlier?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that would have been different in my situation was that the scribe would have been keeping track of an actual shared record of all the meeting outputs. And if there was disagreement about what we were going to do, it'd become obvious right away instead of creating confusion later. And these shared outputs would have really helped keep everyone moving forward together. Even the people who tended to try and hold more in their heads would at least have a way to look back and verify their memory instead of just kind of like, assuming that they knew that they were on track and moving forward on that basis.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Daniel.
In my situation, I think that having a scribe would have helped to create a central place for notes and would have really helped clarify who was doing what and would have saved us hours making the same decision over and over again. Also, I think that would have been important in getting everyone on the same page and help with keeping people accountable to their tasks at hand and helping them to track their own tasks.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thanks, Rebecca. So let's dive into our demonstration of the tracking documents for you, so you'll know exactly how to set up a comprehensive tracking system for your team. Okay, so here is a living agenda. This is a blank template, which you'll retitle with the name of your team here. And you'll want to label the year here as well, so that it will be clear what document you should be accessing at what time. You'll probably want a new living agenda for each year to keep things clear for your team. Here, you'll put the mission of this scope. So whatever scope you're working in, eventually you'll work out a mission that defines the work that you do together, and the scribe will update it here at the top of the document. Here, you'll see a key for how to highlight the things that you write in this document. So as you're scribing, there are going to be certain outputs that you are going to be highlighting. So next steps and actions, projects are highlighted in pink, governance in blue, elections are in green, and strategies in yellow. And here you're going to update this section with the links to the other tracking docs that you'll be setting up for your team. This table of content automatically updates when you press this refresh button. So you'll be able to access any meeting that you guys have right here in the table of contents. And the way you get started is you copy this whole template and you paste it right down here, and then you delete all the unnecessary text. And then you'll rename this template with today's date or whatever date you're having the meeting on. So, for example, if you're having the meeting on 10/20, then you'll rename it with that date. And as you can see, when you refresh this table of contents, that meeting will pop up so that you can go to it directly. Then the facilitator will lead you through the meeting process, and the scribe will take on the role of recording the outputs of the conversation. The facilitator will know how to lead you through check-ins, and the scribe will just record everyone's name who is present. So that's all the scribe records for check-ins. In admin details, as the facilitator leads you through, you'll write down just the salient details that you need to remember. So we have a hard out at a certain time. We have a facilitator. And we have a scribe. And that's all that's recorded in admin details, just the important details that your team needs to know about what happened at that meeting in order to move forward. In ops reports, you'll go through the whole process of ops reporting in your ops tracking doc. And the only thing that's recorded in the living agenda are just next actions and projects. So there might be a next action for me to reach out to Rebecca, or for Daniel to contact his partner, his business partner. And that's the only thing that's recorded in the ops report section. And that will be highlighted in this pink here, all the way to the left. So that's the only thing the scribe records in the apps reporting section. It's just the outputs of the conversation. In the agenda, you'll have various agenda items that come out of the team that the team will record or you will record, either way. In any case, they may look like biz model review. They might look like what's our strategy. And they might be something like dressing up for Halloween. Okay, and then the facilitator will lead you through the meeting process in order to discover what needs to be moved forward on these agenda items. And what the scribe will record are things like important info, which will be recorded like this, info only, and then you'll just write whatever info is being exchanged. And then there may be some more next actions like Rebecca to schedule a biz model review meeting. And again, that will be highlighted in this pink here. There might even be some governance that comes out of the discussion. For example, whole company shall dress up in costumes for Halloween. So you can see that that's phrased a little differently than next actions. Next actions are direct and to the point. They're telling somebody to do something. When you're discussing governance, it's about the whole team or about a role. So it's saying that the whole team or a certain role shall do something according to what the team has agreed to do. And that's highlighted in this blue here. And again, you can always refer to the top to see what color it needs to be highlighted in. There may be a bunch of other governance that comes out of these discussions. You'll go over that with your facilitator, whether it's a strategy discussion or a purpose discussion, and they'll all be phrased a little bit differently. But they'll all be highlighted in blue, yellow, or green, as you can see here. So that's the only thing that the scribe writes during the agenda. It's really minimally sufficient. There may be some info, there definitely will be some next actions and projects, and then there may be some governance that passes. Then you'll move into wrap. The facilitator will lead you through the wrap process, which is just talking about when the next meeting will be. For example, which you'll write here. And then you'll also cover who's going to send out the wrap. So the scribe usually sends out the wrap, which I'll show you how to do in just a moment. And then in the closing round, just like in check-ins, you'll just write who was there and who closed out. So then you'll generate the wrap. So in order to generate a wrap, I just highlight all of these things. And usually I put it into my email, but we're just going to open a new doc here so I can show you how that's done. But you're going to do this in your email so you can send it out to your whole team. So what I do is I just paste everything in there. And then I reorganize a little bit. So that's what the wrap looks like. You'll have the next meeting up there, you'll have the next actions captured, and whatever governance that your team has passed throughout the meeting process. And then you'll want to send that out to the whole team, whether they were there at the meeting or not, just to make sure everyone's on the same page about what was achieved in that meeting and when the next meeting is. This is a really important way to wrap up what you have achieved for the team and also to keep everyone on the same page to know what's going on and when the next meeting is. Okay, as soon as a meeting is finished, what you want to do is create a new agenda so that if there are any agenda items that come out through the course of your work, everyone has a chance to put them here on the agenda ahead of time. So again, what you do here is copy this whole section and paste it here on top of the previous meeting. You'll see that the previous meeting is still down here, but the most recent meeting is always going to be on top. So again, you would just delete all this unnecessary text, and you'll rename this meeting for the next meeting date that you are having. Which everyone can access right here. So that's your living agenda. This is where you take notes during meeting times, where you'll access it to put in your agenda items ahead of time, and everyone will be looking at this document during your meeting process so that you can all see what you're generating together. The next document I'm going to introduce you to is the ops tracking doc. Now, the scribe has a minimal position in the ops tracking doc. Everyone in a team has the job to update this document according to what they're doing, what their projects are, whatever metrics they're covering, and whatever scopes that they're leading. So for example, I have a column here with my name and just some of the roles that I might be holding. And then here, for example, we could put a column for Rebecca and a column for Daniel. And the scribe's role here is just to update their column, right? I just update this column. And Rebecca and Daniel update their own columns with recurring tasks, projects, metrics, and scope reports. You'll be working through this document in the meeting process during the ops reporting section. So everyone will be looking at this document, talking about how you're doing on recurring tasks, what's up with your projects, and all of the salient details of those. Just the next actions we'll be recording in the living agenda, as I showed you. There may be other tabs down here, like completed projects, which you'll put your completed projects in, personal development practice, maybe even some metrics tabs. The scribe may have the role of metrics, which means they will be updating this metrics tab, but otherwise, just the scribe is taking care of their column in the ops tracking doc. Next, I'll introduce you to the master governance doc. The scribe actually plays a really key role in this document because all of the governance that you pass in the meeting has to be updated in this document when it's passed. So there'll be strategic metaphors and initiatives here. Scopes are updated here. Roles and accountabilities are a really important place for everyone to be on the same page, and it's the scribe role to update these here. Meeting policies mean how you're meeting, when you're meeting, and where you're meeting. And there may be other general policies that you've generated for the team. For example, all members shall dress up for Halloween this year. And that's how that's updated here. You'll also go through a role generation and review process, which you'll update here. And then you can populate the roles and accountabilities tab from that. There's some purpose information in the mission, vision, and values tab and the current state map. And then specific financial proposals may be something that your team takes on in order to track those, which will be updated here. In any case, the scribe's role in this document is to keep everything updated when it's passed in a meeting process so that everyone can access this document at any time and they can read about the policies or the accountabilities that they're responsible for, and then everyone will be on the same page. Next, I'll introduce you to the business model tracker. So this is your business model tracker. Again, like with all of these documents, you're going to want to rename this so that it's just for you and your team. Now, every team is going to have a person who is a business model tracker that's going to take responsibility for this document, for updating it, for knowing what all the tabs are indicating, and for introducing the rest of the team to it through the business model review process. The scribe's role in this document may be to keep it updated according to the year, maybe to generate a new one for each year, to name it. The scribe may have some responsibilities with formatting, but in general, it's the business model tracker person's job to update this document for the team. So what you'll do as a scribe is just to generate this document and then pass it off to the business model tracker person. Okay, so that was just a brief introduction to the documents that you can take on for your team in order to enable you to have really open accountability for everyone so that everyone can be on the same page and have all the information they need at their fingertips. Do you guys have any questions about those documents?
I have a question. I'm wondering about how the facilitator and scribe work together. Like, how do they sort agenda items or decide to move on to the next tension, and who does what?
Yeah, great question, Rebecca. So during a meeting process, there may be a lot of agenda items on your agenda. You know, I just showed you an example with 3 agenda items, but there may be, a dozen or 2 dozen even. If you have a really important time or you don't have a lot of meetings, that might populate the agenda with even more tensions. So what you want to do is initiate a voting process, which the facilitator will lead everyone through. Then with the votes, the scribe will help reorganize the agenda so that it can be more clear for everyone what agenda item you're going to first, second, third, and so on. Then what happens during agenda processing is that the facilitator will go into each agenda item as they come up. The scribe will write down everything, as I showed you. And then it's important for the facilitator and the scribe both to be checking in to see if everything's been recorded and if they're ready to move on to the next agenda item. So it's ultimately the facilitator's job to decide when to move on to the next tension. However, the scribe is responsible for checking in to make sure that everything has been solved. For example, if there's a next action that doesn't have a clear person, the scribe will say, "It sounded like there was a next action there, but I don't know who's taking that on." And then the facilitator will say, "Great," and then find out who's going to be taking that on according to the roles that the people are holding. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. And that does kind of lead into my question too, which is about the outputs. How does the scribe know what exactly is the important information to capture in the living agenda, like of the various possible outputs and formats? How do you know what to put down there?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So as you're learning how to scribe, you'll learn more and more about what is important to your team to capture. But it might be important to start just by writing down the things that sound important and then checking in with the team to see if that captured everything that they needed to know. It may even help to have other members of the team say, "That sounded important. I need that recorded." And then you'll write down that as info only. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what you're saying too is that for specific decisions like governance and stuff like that, that they have like a specific format. And so the facilitator will help make sure that we get to that particular way of describing the decision, for instance. But if for info only, it's more fluid. Different people might need different information down just to keep kind of a record of something because it was an important part of the conversation, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. So for info only, it's just what the team needs to move forward, just the information that's been exchanged that's really important to move forward. Sometimes there's a lot of extra information that's exchanged that doesn't need to be scribed and may crowd the agenda if everything that everyone says is written down. However, with shared agreements like governance, there is a specific format. So for example, with elections, you want to say who's being elected, what role they're being elected into, and how long they're going to be holding that role. So that's just an example, and there's a specific format for the outputs of each governance process.
Cool, thank you. Just have another question. What if I want to take my own notes during a meeting? Is that allowed? And sometimes I like to capture more information than the kind of the specific outcomes you named. And do I do that on my own, or can I use the agenda for that? I mean, since we all have access to it generally during the meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It's really important during the meeting that you're observing the process and the scribe is recording everything that needs to be recorded. If you do have something that it seems important to you that's not being recorded, you can insert a comment and ask that the comment be integrated into the agenda, or you can take your own notes as you like. It's encouraged that everyone write down all the information they need in their own notebook. And then again, if you have anything that isn't recorded that you'd like recorded, just be clear with the scribe about it by inserting a comment or having a small discussion with them through the meeting process.
Good, thank you.
Anything else?
I have another question. I'm thinking about how amazing these tools are, and they're only effective if they stay updated and used regularly. How do you get your team to start using all these docs consistently?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. What I would encourage you to do as you're taking on the scribing process is to introduce your team to these documents one by one. You start with a living agenda because it's clear to everyone that having notes taken during a meeting is really important. They'll get used to seeing the format that you're putting in there, the highlighting that you're doing, and how each new agenda is stacked on top of the previous one so that they can access it really fast during their work. Once they get used to that, they'll also start to wonder, where do these next actions go? And you can introduce them to the ops tracking doc so that each person can take ownership of their column. That can be a really empowering activity for you to do as a team. So those next actions and projects get stored in one place, and everyone can access them again at any time to update weekly in order to share with the team for appreciations and information. Then you'll be generating some governance, and people will say, well, where is that going to be stored? You can introduce them to the master governance doc. And ultimately, everyone will be wondering what kind of business model your team is pursuing. So that's when the business model tracker comes in. It's important that these documents are used in sync because they all work together to make sure that everyone has access to all the information they need, and everyone can update that whenever they need to in order to make sure that everything is clear to everyone. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone. Remember that this is one of several trainings in the series, so please check out the trainings on integrative consent, roles, personal development, and others. And please reach out to us with any questions. Thanks for joining us.